A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. This week's episode of Build Hatch gave a really interesting and practical perspective on the landscape design and construction industry. This week's guest was Darin from Mint Design. As we have all seen of late, outdoor spaces have really been a popular trend, particularly because of lockdowns and the importance of quality time at home. I really wanted to chat with Darin about the practicalities of his craft, and it's so great to see these guys, that is the landscape designers and trades out there, getting their turn in the spotlight at the moment. Darin and his team at Mint are real artisans, so let's get into it. Okay, Darin from Mint Design, welcome to Build Hatch.
Oh, thanks, Aaron. No, it's great to be here. Looking forward to our chat today.
Now, this one's a beauty. I've been looking forward to this one for some time because you're building some of these amazing fancy pool houses, hardscapes, these, call them amazing structures related to the landscaping industry. So before we talk about this, we always like to go back to, I guess, history and find out what got them into the industry and what did you sort of study after finishing school?
Yeah, so actually I did quite a few things, to be honest with you, but I guess where I ended up was in the wine industry. I was studying to be a winemaker. I'd done viticulture, so studying how to grow grapevines out in the Yarra Valley. I was working at De Bordeley's in the cellar for a few years making wine, and decided that probably wasn't the industry for me for a few different reasons. I kind of wanted to be where the action was, not out in the middle of the vineyard. I wanted to be in the city because I enjoyed the buzz of the city. But yeah, I decided because I had that great connection with biology and growing vines and things, I felt that horticulture was the thing for me. So I went and studied horticulture at Melbourne University for around 4 or 5 years. Got my degree in horticulture, loved that. It was just a beautiful community to study with out there at Burnley College, beautiful gardens and things. Made some great connections. I've got friends from there who are all in. I've got arborists and landscape contractors and agronomists and things. So I've got this really great connection through different parts of the industry.
It's a real sort of tight-knit community, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I had heard that before I got there, but I only understood it once I got there because it is surrounded by gardens. It's a very small network, and unfortunately, I don't think that that course, kind of even exists in that form anymore through Melbourne University, which is a real shame because it churned out some great graduates. It was fantastic. But yeah, so I did the horticulture stuff, and I always knew at that point because Jamie Dury was on TV. Not that I wanted to be Jamie, maybe with the pecs and things, but
yeah, I think we all wanted his body at one stage.
That's right. But it was more about it just seemed like such a dynamic thing to do, and it seemed like a really interesting thing to get into. It seemed like a lot of fun.
So, were you influenced towards this path from growing up or from your family?
No, look, I guess everyone's got their own backstory in terms of loving gardens and things, and I reckon a lot of it. And we're speaking to people who got into this industry. A lot of it comes from grandparents, because our grandparents all had veggie gardens. That's what it was, and gardens, and they loved being in the garden. And even my parents, they enjoyed being in the garden too. So, I guess you've always got those experiences that you grew up with that shape what you like and what you remember and things about gardens. And so that's mine. My memories are going into my grandparents' gardens. Every time I got to their house would be going out the back, seeing what I could pick and eat straight off whether it was the walnuts off the walnut tree or the beans and the snow peas and things. That sort of memories were fantastic, and that's like I said, a lot of people have that connection from their grandparents. I don't think it comes through so much these days because there's not as many green thumbs around.
It's so true, and you're right, they are amazing memories, and going back to grassroots levels and having that space, I guess, back down on larger house blocks and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even not even they did definitely have a bit more space. I think you're right, but they made the most of that space, and it didn't seem to matter how much room they had. They would put veggies in wherever they could, and that was great. And we've kind of lost that, I think, or people still now I think are going back to that a bit more, especially after lockdown. I think there's definitely more of a push to have that produce type stuff in their backyard. But that's I guess where basis of the enjoyment of gardens and things comes from. And I guess in a way you're always trying to capture that again in a way in regards to, say, creating spaces that feel good to be in and make people want to be outdoors and be in those lush green spaces with family and friends and things like that as well. So I guess that's kind of the essence of what we're trying to do and of what all of us are trying to capture in landscape design now as well. But I think what we do now is quite a long way, in a way, removed from that productive type style garden. And it's more about now, I think, creating spaces that are convenient, easy to use, and in a way low maintenance as well.
Yeah, look, I think you're spot on there. And I guess from your perspective, it's an evolving, constant change of fulfilling people's practical desires in terms of what they want from their backyards, as opposed to combining living spaces now. And as I said earlier, you're designing massive, significant landscaping and hardscaping projects. So we're not just talking about backyards here. We're talking about pool houses and inside and outside. And going back to, I guess, coming out of uni and finally working out after studying what you wanted to do, what did you sort of set about to do in your industry?
Well, I wanted to do as much as I could and anything I could. So I actually probably took a little bit of a different path. During uni, I was doing garden maintenance. I worked in a retail nursery. I did a bit of landscape construction. I just wanted to get as much experience as I could. And, I value those experiences now because they actually ground my knowledge in landscape design more than I think other people would get without not having those experiences, especially the landscape maintenance stuff. I was gardening for 2 years in some beautiful gardens, and just having the experience of seeing how plants grow and how they respond to different environments and how you care for them really, I guess, forms the basis of your planting design and things like that as well, and just understanding how plants work. So I did a lot of that stuff. Ended up working in some various different places in terms of doing construction and maintenance. But I guess the first interesting gig I had was I started working for almost like a kind of commercial landscaping business, and they wanted to do design. So I became their designer and effectively managed the design business. And talk about being thrown in the deep end. I had no idea what I was doing, but it was a huge experience. It was an amazing experience, and one I probably don't want to repeat. But it was good fun, and I learned a lot. And
so back then, like, what did you use, software, or was it hand drawn sketches? Like, how did it work?
I've always used software. I've always been able to hand draw my landscapes as well. You kind of learn that as part of the design course at Burnley. But no, I've always used software. I've always used AutoCAD because it's a nice, simple program to use for landscape. So I went and got the knowledge to how to use that as well. I studied it. I deliberately studied it through my uni days as an elective, just because I think you needed that. You just needed that. You could see where the industry was going in terms of, digital design and things like that. And there's nothing better than being able to draw it up digitally so you can modify it easily later on as well. And we're even moving into obviously more modeling and rendering and things as well now. And we're just trying to get on top of that and be not necessarily industry leader, because a lot of people are doing it now, but getting our foot in the door pretty early with that stuff because we know that's where it's going as well.
So back then, was it relatively easy to import all the different species of plants that you wanted, or did you have to kind of improvise there? Like, how did it work?
No, look, it was that they were plant wise. I think everything was always there to use, but I mean, with our industry, I guess, kind of exploding over the last few years, the demand for different types of plants has gone up, and the availability of plants has gotten better. Everything's gotten bigger in our industry, and there's more suppliers than ever, and more, I guess, materials to use than ever as well. So it has, but I mean, I guess design kind of grows as products become available. So it's probably been a little bit of both happening can, at the same time, as more materials come on the market and plants come on the market, you start using those things. And as we start using those things, more of that stuff comes in. So it's kind of grown together in that respect. So it's never been difficult to get things. But when I look back now, 15 or 20 years ago, whatever it was, you certainly was more limited, but we didn't notice it being limited back then, right?
That's right. And I think one of the things that I was really interested in talking to you about is I'm stoked to see the year of recording this. So we're still in 2021, but the whole landscape industry, in my opinion, has now shifted where you guys are now having your heyday. Like this is your triumphant period. You're now, without offending anyone, it was kind of like the landscape gets designed around the house. The house comes first, and then you guys come in. It was almost like you were like cousins of the house. Whereas now you're part of the family. You're part of the furniture. You guys are probably coming in early in the piece. Like I'm seeing conversations with people involved in developments where landscape architecture and the surrounds and the functionality of those spaces are just as equally as important as the internal living spaces. So equal playing fields, heyday for you guys. I love it.
You are 100% right there. I think, as I mentioned before, the industry has exploded, and we're more. You're right. There is this shift, I guess, between the way people see and view the landscape and the importance, and more. It was always about the house. It was always, obviously people live in their house 95% of the time, and they use the landscape, 5 or 10% of the time. But we are finding now people are contacting us before they do the houseworks because they want to make sure that their pool or outdoor areas all right and correct before they start designing their house around the landscape. It's quite a big shift, and that is surprising to see that. Although when you've had sort of 10 or 15 years of these programs, again, Jamie Dury, but more the block as well. It's been running for a long time, and there was a handful of other TV shows that I guess promoted our industry and what we do in particular as landscape designers, saying, hey, there's people out there that can, I guess, help you design spaces that work better for you and look really good. And, we've had that for quite some time. And I think people are starting to go, okay, there is this whole industry of people out there who we can go to get a design and get help and get a great result. And spend our money correctly rather than doing it ourselves. So that's been the big shift over the 10 or 15 years. And with lockdowns and things, perfect storm, everyone's looking at their backyard wistfully wishing that they had have put a pool in or, put the basketball court in so the kids could use it, and just have that availability and use that space more practically. And so now we're seeing this huge, huge push for landscape design, landscape contractors, and maybe now you're right, landscape construction was not a hugely well paid industry in the past, and it's kind of nice that we're seeing the landscape contractors finally probably making a margin that's reasonable. At least I hope they are. They're making good margins like builders may have in the past.
Well, they're considered artisans now, and particularly in your craft, in your area, and the projects you're doing, but they're considered artesian tradesmen. So they're now equally valued, if you want to use that term.
They've always been, I guess, called jack of all trades landscapers, right? So they're not just deck builders. You got a chippy for that, or they're not just stonemasons or pavers, but they do it all. And to do that, to do it all well, you've got to be good at what you do, and you've got to have good experience. It's not something you can just sort of step into and all of that. You've got to have good experience. Have done it for years and years and years to do it well. So, and I do still have to talk clients around to using not the cheapest landscaper, because it's not a regulated industry, and that you've got, you don't have a master builders association that you're associated with. Anyone can call themselves a landscaper. So I do have to, I always say to clients that there's landscapers and there's landscapers. There's guys who call themselves landscapers, but then there's guys who are excellent amazing at their craft, and they're the guys we want to use because they make a project run much more smoothly, and they may be a little bit more expensive, but they also have a higher expectation of the finished product, and you will be happy with the finished product. Whereas if you use a guy that's not necessarily, has that same standard, you can easily be disappointed and still spend a lot of money. So, these guys are artisans, and some of them are amazing at what they do, and I love to use those. And working with those guys is an absolute pleasure.
Now, tell me about some of these projects that you're working on. Like what's like a large, cool project, some of these ones that you've been working on lately?
Yeah, well, they kind of keep coming pretty thick and fast at the moment. I mean, we seem to be getting bigger spaces to work with, and it's these projects, I guess, that have a bit of everything involved. So you might have an alfresco area, a pool area, even carports and fire pit areas. It's kind of like all of these things. And if you've got enough space to work with and enough budget to work with, they're really exciting. So we've got some great projects out all over the place, to be honest. There's a great one up in Williamstown on the beachfront there that we're working on. It's a beautiful architect design house. Lots of, I guess it's the in vogue thing, but lots of formed concrete, architectural concrete, and some beautiful detailing as well around the pool and things where we're dropping the paving through the pool as well, which always looks pretty smart. It is about, I guess, clients having a higher expectation of what they get too. And if you've got a client with high expectations and you've got high expectations of yourself, and they've got a good budget that they can meet those expectations, you can do amazing things. So we've got some great projects on the cards, and a lot of them are getting built too, which is a wonderful change, because often you can be the best designer in the world, but if you're not getting projects built, no one would know it. So I always value the fact that when a project is built and done at the end of the day, that is a good feeling, because it takes a lot to get stuff built. It's not just a matter of us pushing something out the door with a plan and saying thanks very much, we'll see you later, and next thing you know, that thing's built. It doesn't work like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens throughout that process where you're involved in the construction in a way, in terms of troubleshooting as you go along. And just dealing with suppliers and bringing in plants and things like that as well. So there's quite a lot that needs to happen throughout the construction process where we get involved as well. And so, value. When you get something constructed, it's a beautiful feeling.
Absolutely. And you mentioned about, I guess, the communication and the teamwork. Like, there's so much collaboration with your craft, because you have that balancing act of, is the construction of your design, is it landscaping work, or is it so big that it becomes, you mentioned off-form concrete, that it becomes the builder does that part? So there's some collaboration with those two.
Yes.
And then what about the collaboration that goes on with, say, a client and the process of you discussing functionality with the client? Like, how does that work when you sit down with them and try and find their brief and what they want?
Yeah, well, the client is probably central to that collaboration. You need to collaborate, obviously, with builders, landscape contractors, and everyone. But if you've got a good client who's central to that and who's a good communicator themselves, there's nothing better. That's when the best projects kind of happen, I guess. And that's not just about being an easy client. I think clients who test you and ask a lot of questions and get involved in that process are often some of the best ones, because as long as they're open to working on the fly and working with contractors, the designers and things like that, that's when you get a great result. So yeah, look, and I guess setting expectations, getting back to your question there, I think in terms of construction and things, the one thing you've got to do with clients always is set expectation. And that's not always an easy thing, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. But, even with something as simple as, let's go back to architectural concrete, talking through with them what to expect from architectural concrete, for example, is really important, because you can easily get to a place where the concrete goes in and, your client turns around to you and says, well, why isn't that concrete perfect? Why aren't those lines perfectly straight? Why do I have little hairline cracks in my concrete that I just paid through the nose for? Because architectural concrete isn't cheap. So you kind of expect this, perfect finish. But but that's not the way it works. So if you're not setting the expectation about saying, look, it's concrete, it is, they do their best to form it up, but at the end of the day, that those lines, if you look closely, they're not perfect, and you will get hairline cracking because that's what happens with concrete, no matter what. So that stuff's all going to come up, and that goes for everything. The more you can talk, the more you can set those expectations for the client, the smoother a project will be.
You mentioned fire pits and off-form concrete. Is there anything like really cool going on in the industry at the moment, and like some really cool features? And like if you had the perfect brief where someone said, look, my budget's $500,000 for landscaping, what are some of the cool things that you'd incorporate?
Yeah, look, I guess you would. I mean, you'd have a bit of fun with architectural concrete. You would, because it's such a flexible product. You can introduce curves easily. You can kind of almost do whatever you want. You're only limited by your imagination with that sort of product. So yeah, you'll see a lot of formed concrete going on around. I'm a big fan of bringing in, say, that really clean lines of architectural concrete, but then maybe having some random stone paving around that, like a natural stone product, and having that sort of, to use the wanky design term, the juxtaposition between the materials is really lovely. But I reckon the bit that where everyone is pushing boundaries at the moment, where the really exciting stuff is happening, is probably in pools. And just what people are doing with pools at the moment, with negative edges and infinity edges have always been around. That look that you kept the ocean going when you look across the vista of the pool. But that stuff's being integrated into backyards now, and even acrylic windows. The windows into the pool are having a bit of a comeback at the moment as well, and doing those really high end finishes in a residential backyard is where people are really pushing boundaries at the moment. So there's some really amazing stuff coming through. And I almost think that Melbourne and Sydney are almost ground zero for landscape design in the world, and pools in the world. We are the biggest consumer of pool tiles per capita in the world, which is incredible. So we're putting in pools more than anywhere else, I think, at the moment. And yeah, it's not surprising, I guess, that you're just getting some incredible stuff that's coming through. You wait to see the next 6 to 12 months what after people start photographing their projects, what has been really happening over the last 2 years is just phenomenal.
You are right. There's this big resurgence in construction that's been going on through COVID, and it's that value adding that we were talking about earlier with people's home being their oasis and home working environment a couple of days a week. So it's so important, and people are spending money on those backyard spaces.
I think that's the shift, is that we've always wanted, I guess, a beautiful outdoor area, but in 20, 30 years ago, you might have just dropped in a above ground pool, right, and just had it, and that was great. Or turned the hose on under the trampoline, right? Whereas now it's more about, we want a pool, but we want it to look amazing, and we're willing to pay for that to look amazing. And so that's I think the shift is that we want something a really high end finish now, and so the clients are expecting something like that, and so we're, I guess, able to deliver that, which is pretty exciting, and it's fun to work with that. And if it was my perfect brief would be, I've got a big budget, have some fun. We want to see you. We want to see what you can do. But I mean, there's always a brief. There's always a budget. There's always practical considerations of the site to consider. And there's always a client who I guess clients always want something for in their own way, or a particular for their family. And that's, we've got to work with those parameters all the time. You would rarely get, the only time you kind of get that kind of brief is when you do a garden show for yourself and you've got a decent budget and you can design whatever you like. That's kind of nice. But, part of what we do is solving problems and working through, those issues that come up, whether that be a sloping site or, a smaller budget for a large wish list, that sort of things. But what we're finding at the moment is we really need to be very clear about what things cost with clients, because everybody does have a big wish list at the moment. We all want the convenience of having a pool, of having a basketball ring, of having a fire pit. But if a client turns around to me and says, I've got 100,000, and that's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but when you have a big wish list like that, we've got to be very honest with the client and saying that it's just not achievable to get all those things in that for that price. So, because prices are going up, everything's going up because the supplies are going up in price. But landscape contractors are obviously putting their prices up because they've got so much demand at the moment too.
Yeah, definitely right. Now, one interesting question that always comes up when I'm talking to someone who's doing any form of landscaping or anything like that is, how do you effectively get enough, say, privacy screening? What's an alternative besides bamboo? Because everyone does bamboo and, it grows quickly. You get nice privacy screening relatively quickly, but then it just gets out of control. So
it does. Yeah.
yeah.
No,
What's a good alternative? I've always wanted to ask someone who
Okay.
knows what they're talking about in that field.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's actually a classic question because, our backyards are getting smaller, but we still want to get privacy and screen off our neighbours. They don't want to see us. We don't want to see them. So we all want to but we've only got a limited space to work with. So, bamboo is a good one because it's so tall and narrow. Don't put it next to pools because it does drop a lot of stuff.
It makes a mess, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But, that challenge has been around for a while now, and what the nursery industry is doing is responding to that by breeding plants that have those attributes that we all want. So we all want them to be 1 metre wide. We want them to grow to 3 or 4 metres at maturity, so we don't have to prune them so much, and they're not super fast growing. So we used to use pittosporums, what are they called, Screen Master or Neighbours Be Gone or whatever they were, and they're pretty hideous too because you plant those and then if you don't trim them every 2 weeks at this time of year, which is spring, they're 6 meters tall before you know it. So what I would use is lily pillies. There's a whole great range of lily pillies that come out that are bred again for those particular sort of sizes. So the one I tend to use is it's called Syzygium resilience, which is just a lily pilly resilience, and I use the resilience version because it doesn't get certain pest on it, as some lily pillies do. Those little bumpy leaves, if you see that.
Yeah, okay.
They're called psyllids. But anyway, resilience is good for that sort of thing. There's a couple of other plants, depending on how much shade you're getting, but another one is blueberry ash. I think that's a really nice, tall, narrow tree. It's native to Queensland, but grows relatively well down here in Melbourne. It's called Aliocarpus.
So you could buy those sort of half matured, like a couple of meters tall.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could. Yeah. And if you want to spend a few extra dollars, but they're relatively fast growing plants, so you could probably grow them. I usually buy them in 30 centimetre pots to give them a bit of a head start, but they generally grow pretty quickly. If you've got a more of a shady area, I tend to use Prunus lusitanica, which is not a native plant, but it's a lovely dark green shrub. It's a bit slower growing, but I always say to people that you get a bit of a trade-off with these screening plants is if you buy a fast-growing plant, it's great because it'll give you quick screening. But at the same time, it's a fast-growing plant, so you're going to be maintaining that, and trimming the face of it or trimming the top of it more often. So I tend to say to people, I use a slower to medium-growing plant so that it may take longer, but you've got less maintenance in the long run. So, so there's just a couple. But the other one, I guess, is the perfect poolside plant is ficus or ficus flash, which is the ornamental fig. Doesn't have flowers.
They look great, don't they? They also look fantastic with off-form concrete. Blend in very well.
Nice glossy green leaf. They don't have flowers. They don't have fruit. They don't drop stuff in your pool. They grow next to pools really well. And it's probably one of the only ones that's kind of considered pool compliant, because that's the other issue we're going to get. And that's probably another podcast for another day. But they're great next to pools. And if you don't mind trimming them every now and then, they're a great plant too for that sort of space.
Yeah, they always look good, nice and round, don't they?
Oh, they look amazing. And you can clip them into beautiful shapes. So the classic, I say they're the classic Toorak hedge. If you go through Toorak, you'll see them everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But there's a reason for that. They grow easily and they trim up nicely too. And I guess the other reason for that is they've all got gardeners. So they don't mind doing the pruning.
And pool men.
And pool guys. Yeah, their pools always look really good.
That's right.
But that, I guess that's about setting expectations with plants. People say to me, I want low maintenance, and you've got to tell people it's a garden. It's going to need maintenance. And yes, we can do low maintenance, but that there's no such thing as a no maintenance garden. And it's really about just picking the right species, and particularly when it comes to those hedging type plants where you really want to, we used to use these big Waterhausia floribunda, which are the big lily pillies, and they want to become trees. They want to become 10, 20 meter trees. And so I don't, I certainly don't. If someone's not going to have a gardener maintaining those things, I would never plant them as a hedge. But you'll know, 20 years ago, that's what we were using. But now we've got all these other options because they've been bred for these particular spaces, and we can use the smaller versions, smaller lily pillies. They're brilliant.
Now, what about the market where people are paying, say, $15,000-$20,000 for these mature trees that have to be craned in? I mean, you mentioned Jamie Jury's earlier, and that's well documented about what he's been doing. And I mean, he's worked on some amazing projects where they have to cart these trees in by helicopter onto a pontoon and then lift them into place with a crane. So, I mean, what are some of these trees that people are doing with that sort of scope?
Yeah, well, the classic one, I saw one 2 days ago actually down in Beaumaris, down on the coast there. And someone had dropped in, I think it was 4 or 5 of these huge palm trees, the Phoenix canariensis, which is the big Canary Island date palm, which you'll see all along St Kilda foreshore and things. But people will drop those in mature, and they need to be craned, and they're usually about 20 to 25,000 to drop in. And this guy had put in 4 or 5 of them. They're the classic ones because they take so long to grow that people want them really mature. But the other one we tend to use a bit is dragon trees, because dragon trees are the perfect tree. They're the tree that if everyone could have them, they would, because they're evergreen. They don't require any maintenance. They don't really drop anything at all, and they're perfect. They're nice small tree. They're great. The issue with them is that they take 20 or 30 years to get to a good size. So people will spend $10,000 to $15,000 on putting one of those in, and they're amazing trees, and we do use them quite a bit. But obviously, I've just outlined the advantages, and that's why people put them in. They're perfect, and they're beautiful architectural statement pieces in a garden too.
Well, you're doing some amazing work around Melbourne and beyond. Now, what does Darin like to do when he's not busy designing beautiful, amazing homes and landscaping ideas?
Well, at the moment, I don't have any time for anything else. No, mate, I play a lot of basketball when I'm not working, and because I used to play it when I was younger, and I stopped playing for 20 years, and now I've got back into that, and finding myself with a new injury every couple of weeks, because that's the way your body works when you're over 40. You pull your back getting off the couch sometimes. No, look, spending time with kids, doing the run around. I'm like everybody else. Sports have opened back up again, so I'm ferrying my children around to their own basketball and acting classes and things like that. And between that and trying to renovate a house at the moment, I don't have any other time. I'm sleeping. Hopefully.
Recovering.
Yeah, that's all you can do. It's full on out there at the moment, but we'll just hopefully things ease off a little bit next year, and we can get some balance back into our lives.
All right. Well, what about the name, Darin? I mean, I love the name Mint Design. Is there sort of a cool story behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a cool story, but it's definitely a marketing type story. When you sit down, I've got a business partner. So when you sit down and try and think of a name for your business, I mean, you write down, pages and pages of different names, and ideally you come up with something you both kind of like. But, what we were trying to aim for was something that was botanical, that was short and sharp and contemporary. But had connotations to what we do as well. And so, mint, like I said, is obviously botanical. It's fresh, and it's something everybody likes. So, although I've had plenty of people turn around to me and say, yeah, it costs a mint. That wasn't quite what we were aiming for, but no, we both liked the name. We both liked its botanical connotations, and it seemed to fit the brief really well. So that's why we went for mint. And I'll say to people out there, if you are thinking about, because we rebranded, we were TLC Design, and we rebranded to Mint Design. But if you're going through that process, I mean, have a good think about your name, but don't think about it too hard, because I don't necessarily think it's about the name of the business that changes a lot. It's the branding of the business around that, and if you think of something like Apple, which is, again, short, sharp, fresh name, it has nothing to do with their business. But, the name alone doesn't mean anything without the branding and all the stuff you've established behind it. And now when you think about Apple, you think about beautiful products that just work, beautiful packaging and all that sort of stuff. And that also costs a mint. But it's about how you build your brand and how everyone perceives your brand more than, I think, your name. So, we've obviously came up with a name, but we're trying to build the brand around that as much as possible too. And obviously get a thing out there in the market where people have a certain expectation of what we do and how we do it, and they know what to expect when they engage Mint Design.
Yeah, look, I love it, and straight away when I think of Mint Design, I think the light, cool color and good quality. That's what I come to mind immediately. So
great.
Look,
I'll thank the marketing team.
Yeah. Look, you're doing some amazing things, some amazing projects, and one of the things I love about your business and what you guys are doing is so practical and having that practical in touch side. We're not talking high level scientific, above the mind type stuff. We're talking about that functional living and practicality, which is what makes you guys a successful business.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, no, it's absolutely critical in our line of work to balance the practical, pragmatic side of things with the beautiful side of things, and making those two things come together and packaging them up just right so that everything works and looks great at the same time.
Now, people listening to the show who want to reach out, get into contact with you, what's the best way to go about it?
Yeah, look, the best way is to give us a buzz in the office. Our phone number, 94340525, is probably the best way to get in touch. And we'd love to have a chat first. I mean, we can always do emails and things like that, but I kind of like to have a chat with my clients over the phone here in the office and just sort of understand a little bit more about their project. So that's the first way. And we'll normally come out and do a consultation first up and sort of meet them on site and talk through their project and understand what's happening with their site. So that's the best way to go about it. And I'd love people to give us a call and have that first chat over the phone.
And also, I recommend everyone listening to this, jump over onto your Instagram page. You guys have got some amazing projects on work that you're doing, some that you have in the pipeline, others that you've done. So
yeah,
everyone should check that out. And look, Darin from Mint Design, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and thanks for coming on to Build Hatch.
No problem at all, Aaron. It was a pleasure to be here, and hopefully your listeners got something out of that. And if they want to give us a call, and we'd love to talk to everyone. But really enjoyed our chat today, mate. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Darin. Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with myself and Darin from Mint Design in Melbourne. As usual, please check out our own Instagram page and other socials to learn more about a guest and some of the features of the work that we talk about. People are really starting to write into the show now and nominate other amazing people out there with really cool stories. So please do keep it up, and we'd love to keep spreading the message in the industry. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.